Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Okay, so starting a professional drone mission. It really isn't just about, flipping the power switch and checking the battery.
Not at all. It's much more involved.
It feels like you're plugging into this whole global safety system almost. Something that's built on decades of aviation history, but also uses all this amazing real-time data.
That's a great way to put it. And for the top operators, that pre-flight site assessment, that whole process, it's arguably the most critical safety barrier they have. It's foundational.
Right. Because when you look at the materials we've gathered for today, we've got regulatory texts, practical checklists, comparisons between the US and Canada, these advanced risk models. It's clear that a professional pre-flight isn't just ticking boxes.
Exactly. It's a safety management system in itself. And crucially, it has to be something you can prove you did. It needs to be auditable.
Which really sets up what we're trying to do in this deep dive. We want to boil down all that information, all those sources, into the core knowledge you need to really master these elite professional SUAS, small unmanned aircraft system pre-flight assessments.
Yeah, we'll be unpacking the rules Part 107 here in the US and CARS Part 9X up in Canada, which has some interesting differences.
And the tech that makes it work, right? Things like LANC, UAS facility maps, remote ID.
Definitely. But maybe even more importantly, we need to get into the human factors side of things. The pilot's condition, the pressures, and how frameworks like bow tie analysis help manage the actual risk.
The goal here really is transformation, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want you to move beyond just a generic checklist to where your pre-flight is a structured, measurable safety strategy.
A strategy that doesn't just keep you safe and compliant, but one that actually shows clients your level of competence. That's what wins the complex jobs, the high-value bids. You've got to master the assessment before you can master the operation.
Okay, let's unpack this, maybe starting with a look back. Because understanding today's rules makes more sense when you know their rather dramatic origin story.
It's fascinating, really. A lot of drone pilots today probably don't realize that the checklist procedure they follow, well, it was basically invented because a plane was just too advanced for its time.
You're talking about the B-17 prototype crash back in 35, right?
Yeah.
The Boeing Model 299.
Exactly, 1935. This thing was a beast for its era. 4 engines, huge payload capacity compared to what came before. Boeing built it for this critical military competition.
And the prototype, this amazing machine, it just crashed on its demonstration flight. But it wasn't like an engine failure or something structural.
No, that's the crucial part. It was pilot overload. The test pilot, Major Pete Hill, a very experienced guy, he just missed a step in the complex pre-flight sequence. He forgot to release the elevator and rudder locks.
Wow. So takeoff, immediate loss of control, catastrophic.
Right. And the official finding was almost chillingly simple. The aircraft was, quote, too much airplane for one man to fly. Just too complex to manage from memory alone.
And the solution wasn't more automation, which is maybe what you'd expect today. It was simpler.
Much simpler and brilliant. They didn't redesign the plane. They invented the pilot checklist. It took all those critical steps, releasing locks, setting flaps, fuel valves, everything out of the pilot's head, out of fallible short-term memory, and put them onto paper. A formal external process.
And that piece of paper, that simple procedure, its DNA is in every drone pre-flight checklist today, isn't it?
Absolutely. Whether you're flying a tiny consumer drone or a massive survey platform, you're performing that same act of procedural discipline, that same admission that memory isn't enough. It's the same humility the B-17 pilots adopted nearly 90 years ago. Hashtag TACT, hashtag BB, the legal and human requirements for pre-flight.
And that procedural necessity, it's baked into the law now, obviously. Here in the U.S., for drone pilots, it's Title 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 107.49. That lays out what the remote pilot in command, the PIC, has to do.
Right. Section 107.49 requires the PIC to assess 5 core areas before every single flight. It's broad, designed to cover all sorts of operations.
Can you quickly run through those 5?
Sure. 1, check the local weather conditions. 2, check airspace status and any flight restrictions, so that means NOTAMs and TFRs. 3, figure out the location of people and property on the ground. 4, identify any other ground hazards, things that could interfere with takeoff or landing. And 5, inspect the drone itself to make sure it's safe to fly.
Okay, pretty comprehensive. Now, how does that compare with Canada? You mentioned their rules, CARS Part 9s are a bit different.
They are, yeah. A bit more prescriptive, you could say. Canada actually requires 2 distinct checks in sequence.
Oh, interesting. What are they?
First, there's a mandatory site survey under SACAR 901.27. This requires the pilot to identify obstacles, a look at the terrain, check for bystanders, and Canada is quite specific about standoff distances plus potential electromagnetic interference, or EMI, and ensuring you're clear of the public.
Okay, so that's the site itself. What's the second check?
After the site survey, CRR 901.28 mandates the actual pre-flight check of the drone system. This covers having the right documents, making sure maintenance is up to date, and verifying the aircraft is operating within its documented limits.
So it feels like the U.S. gives the pilot broad categories, while Canada provides more of a defined checklist, especially regarding the site and public safety.
That's a fair summary. Different styles, same goal, safety. But, regardless of which side of the border you're on, the very first piece of equipment you need to check isn't the drone.
It's the pilot, right?
Yourself, exactly. And that's where those human factors acronyms come in. IMSAFE and PAV. They're standard across aviation for a reason.
Let's break those down. IMSAFE first.
IMSAFE is all about the pilot's internal state. It stands for illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion or eating.
So basically asking, are you physically and mentally fit to fly right now? Are you sick? Taking meds that could impair you? Stressed out, hungover, exhausted, emotionally upset, haven't eaten properly?
Precisely. Any one of those can degrade judgment, perception, reaction time, all critical for safe flight. It forces that personal inventory before you even touch the controls.
And then there's
management framework for the whole operation, broken into 4 categories. P for pilot, which IMSAFE covers. A for aircraft, the drone inspection. V for environment, or environment weather, terrain, airspace. And E for external pressures.
that last one, external pressures. That seems like a huge factor in professional operations. Tight deadlines, clients watching over your shoulder.
Oh, absolutely. External pressure is a known hazard in aviation safety. It's the pressure to get the job done, even when conditions maybe aren't quite right.
So this raises a critical question, doesn't it? MSAFE tells you to check yourself. PAVE acknowledges the pressure.
Yeah.
But how do you actually manage that pressure when it's really high? How do you stop a tight deadline from making you ignore that little voice saying, maybe not today?
That's where operational discipline and pre-planning come in.
Oh.
You can't just rely on willpower in the moment. One technique we advise is designing tiered mission plans.
Tiered plans.
Yeah.
Like plan A, plan B.
Exactly. Plan A is your ideal scenario. Perfect weather, everything goes smoothly, you get maximum coverage. Plan B might be, okay, the wind is picking up a bit, or we lost some time, so we'll fly lower, cover a smaller area, maybe shorter flight legs. Still safe, still get some data.
And plan C.
Plan C is the no-go or minimum viable product. Maybe it's just ground shots today, or maybe we postpone entirely. The key is having these predefined before you're under pressure.
That makes a lot of sense. But practically speaking, how does a solo operator maybe enforce that on themselves? When the client flew you out there and is tapping their foot, saying no based on plan C feels really tough.
It is tough. That's why you need to tie it to objective criteria, what we'll talk about later as tripwires. For example, you predetermine. If the wind gust spread hits X knots, we automatically shift to plan B. It's not you making a subjective call under pressure. It's the pre-agreed procedure kicking in. You briefed the client on these potential plans beforehand.
So the decision was already made back when you were calm and rational. You're just executing the plan.
Precisely. It externalizes the decision, takes the emotional pressure off the pilot in the moment, #3, navigating controlled airspace and dynamic hazards.
Okay, moving on to the V in PAV, the environment. And probably the most complex part of that for U.S. drone operators is navigating controlled airspace. This is where technology like LANC really comes into play.
Oh, LANC, low altitude authorization and notification capability. It's been a total game changer for Part 107 ops, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Before LANC, getting permission to fly near airports could take weeks, phone calls, paperwork. Now it's fast.
Incredibly fast. It's an FAA industry partnership. a data exchange system that automates airspace authorizations in most controlled airspace, specifically Class B, C, D, and the surface areas of Class E. Usually you get an approval or denial in, 30 to 90 seconds?
Near real time, yeah. Which is amazing for planning and flexibility. But how does it work so fast? What's happening behind the scenes?
Well, the key is that your request isn't just checked against the airport's location. It's instantly compared against multiple, about 9, I think, different data streams simultaneously.
9 streams? Like what?
Things like active TFRs, temporary flight restrictions in the area, special use airspace boundaries, current NOTAMs, flight service data. And fundamentally, it checks against the pre-approved altitude ceilings defined on the UAS facility maps, the UASFMs. Your request only gets that automated green light if all those checks come back clear for your specific time and location. ###, AFRA, and the UAS facility map system.
Okay, let's unpack that relationship.
Yeah.
LAANC and the UAS facility maps. The UASFMs are the underlying map, right?
They are the bedrock, yes. The UASFMs show the maximum altitudes in feet above ground level, where the FAA has sort of pre-calculated that automated LAANC authorizations might be possible. These altitudes are based on proximity to airport traffic patterns, approach paths, terrain, stuff like that.
And the map is divided into tiny grids, isn't it? Something like 30 arc seconds by 30 arc seconds.
That's right. Which works out to roughly 1/4 of a square mile per grid cell. Very granular.
Why so small? Why does that matter?
Because the maximum permissible altitude can change dramatically over very short distances. You could be on one side of a large industrial site with a 400-foot ceiling in that grid, move 500 feet towards the airport, cross into the next grid, and suddenly the ceiling is 0 feet because you're now under an approach path.
Wow, so you have to check the map for your exact launch spot.
Every single time. No assumptions.
Now here's a point that seems to trip people up. Seeing a number on the UASFM, say 200 feet, doesn't mean you're automatically cleared to fly up to 200 feet there, does it?
No, absolutely not. And this is critical. The UASFM altitude is guidance. It's the pre-approved ceiling that the LANC system uses for its automated decisions. It is not permission in itself.
So the map tells LANC the limit, but you still need LANC to give you the actual okay.
Exactly. Think of the UASFM like the height limit painted on the entrance to a parking garage. LANC is the attendant who checks your vehicle fits and actually gives you the ticket to enter. You must get an authorization through LANC or the drone zone portal we'll discuss to operate legally in controlled airspace, even if you plan to fly well below that UASFM ceiling.
Okay, that's a vital distinction. Now, LANC is great, but it has limits. It generally only works for flights at or below that UASFM altitude, and only during daylight hours, right? Sunrise to sunset.
Correct. Standard Part 107 operations.
So what happens when a professional needs to operate outside those bounds? Maybe fly higher than the grid allows for an inspection, or fly at night in controlled airspace?
That's when you have to move beyond the automated LANC system and use the FAA's drone zone portal. There are basically 3 main triggers for needing drone zone for controlled airspace access under Part 107.
Okay, what are they?
1, you need to fly above the altitude shown on the UASFM grid for your location, even if you're still technically under 400 feet AGL overall.
2,
you're combining controlled airspace access with some other kind of Part 107 waiver. The classic example is needing to fly at night, which requires a waiver or adherence to the new night rules and needing to do it in, say, Class C airspace. That combination needs manual review by air traffic control.
On the 3rd.
3, you're operating in controlled airspace where LANC just isn't available. This could be around certain military bases or airports with control towers that don't participate in the LANC program. In those cases, drone zone is your only route for authorization.
So LANC equals speed and automation for standard requests. Drone zone equals manual review, more documentation for anything more complex or outside the standard LANC parameters.
That's a good way to sum it up. Complexity triggers the human review.
All right, shifting from this sort of fixed airspace structures to the more dynamic hazards, we have to talk about NOTAMs and TFRs. And there was a name change recently, wasn't there? Back to the old name.
Yes, a bit confusingly. The FAA went from Notice to Airmen to Notice to Air Missions in 2021, and then earlier this year, February 2025, they formally reverted back to Notice to Airmen. But the important thing for pilots is the name doesn't change the obligation to check them. That remains absolute.
And the need to check them reliably.
Yeah.
Well, that January 2023 nationwide ground stop really drove that home, didn't it?
Oh, massively. The first time that's happened since 9/11, all because of a single corrupted file in the NOTAM database system. It took the whole system offline.
That should be a stark warning for every drone operator, right? Relying on just one app for your airspace information.
It's a single point of failure. If that app's feed gets corrupted or misses something, you could be operating illegally or worse, unsafely, without even knowing it. Professional risk management demands redundancy here.
Especially when it comes to TFRs, temporary flight restrictions. These can pop up quickly and they override everything else, right? Even a LAAC authorization you already have.
TFRs are the trump card. They shut down airspace for safety or security reasons. And while people think of presidential visits or disasters, the really common ones that catch drone pilots out are the stadium TFRs.
Right, the stadium gotchas. People might know about NFL games, but it's broader than that.
Much broader. The standard stadium TFR, usually a 3 nautical mile radius up to 3,000 feet above ground, applies to NFL, Major League Baseball, NCAA Division I football, even some NASCAR races. Flying a drone into one of those without authorization is a very serious violation.
And then you have the massive ones, like the Super Bowl TFR. That's huge, isn't it?
Typically a 30 nautical mile radius security TFR. You absolutely have to know if one is active anywhere near your operating area. Pre-flight check is essential.
So what's the pro tip here? How do elite operators ensure they don't miss these?
It's simple, but crucial. Always use 2 independent sources for your airspace check. Use your favorite LAANC app or B4UFLI, sure. But always cross-reference that against the official FAA TFR website, tfr.faa.gov.
And document it.
Screenshot both. Put them in your mission file. That's your proof, your evidence that you performed due diligence using redundant sources. It's barrier assurance.
Okay, let's pivot a bit and talk about how specific scenarios change the pre-flight needs. Night operations in the U.S. saw a big shift with the 2021 rule update.
Huge shift. Before that, night ops generally required a specific Part 107 waiver, which could be time-consuming to get. The 2021 rules allow routine night operations without a waiver, which was a big win for flexibility.
But it wasn't just go fly at night. There were strings attached, requirements that directly impact the pre-flight.
Definitely. 2 main ones. First, the remote PIC has to have completed updated training or testing that covers night operations. Your knowledge needs to be current.
And second, the drone itself needs something specific.
Yes, it must be equipped with anti-collision lighting, visible for at least 3 statute miles. And that light needs to be functioning part of the pre-flight check.
Beyond the pilot and the gear, how does the site assessment change for night ops? You can't just use your daytime checklist, presumably.
Absolutely not. Night flying introduces completely different hazards. Your pre-flight assessment has to specifically look for things like ground-level glare from streetlights or buildings, which can be disorienting. Reflective surfaces like water or glass buildings that can confuse sensors or mess with your depth perception.
And just the basic challenge of seeing the drone, right? Visual line of sight.
Exactly. VLOS is inherently degraded at night. You also need to actively assess night-specific weather hazards. We mentioned fog risk earlier. Checking that temperature dew point spread becomes critical at night when fog can form rapidly.
That TD spread, if it gets too close, say 2 or 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's a major red flag for fog. Your pre-flight plan has to account for that. Maybe you shorten your flight legs so the drone stays closer. Maybe you reduce altitude. You definitely add a dedicated visual observer or VO whose sole job is keeping eyes on the drone. Or you might just have to scrub the mission until conditions improve.
And the crew briefing changes too.
Significantly, especially if you're using a VO. You need clear procedures for how the VO communicates the drone's position and attitude to the PIC in the dark. Often this involves using illuminated wands or specific light signals. It all needs to be briefed beforehand. #BB, flying near over people, diverging international rules.
Okay, let's tackle maybe the highest risk environment.
Yeah.
Flying near or directly over people. The rules here really differ between the US and Canada, don't they?
They do diverge quite a bit in the specifics, yes. But interestingly, the underlying safety logic is the same. Control the aircraft's kinetic energy in a failure and minimize public exposure to risk.
So in the US, under Part 107, Subpart D, if you anticipate flying over people or moving vehicles, you need to follow specific category rules.
Correct. You have to determine which category your operation falls into category 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Category 1 is for the really small drones, right?
Yeah, under 0.55 pounds or 250 grams. And even then, they also need to be remote ID compliant. For anything heavier that might fly over people, you're looking at categories 2 or 3.
And those require more.
Much more. For Cat 2 or 3, the specific drone model must have an FAA-accepted Declaration of Compliance, or DOC. This means the manufacturer has proven through testing that the drone meets specific, very low impact energy thresholds if it were to fail and fall onto someone. The U.S. system puts a heavy emphasis on the certified physical safety limits of the drone itself.
Okay, certified impact energy. How does Canada handle operations near or over people with their standard 922 declaration?
Canada's approach under CARS Part 9X and Standard 922 is a bit different. It focuses less on just the pre-certified impact energy and more on the operator's overall safety plan and the reliability of the specific operation.
This is more about the pilot proving their operation is safe, rather than just relying on the drone certification.
In essence, yes. To operate near or over people using the standard 922 pathway, the operator typically has to submit a declaration detailing things like their specific flight termination system, the reliability of their command and control link, how the drone behaves in loss link or power loss scenarios. Basically, they have to demonstrate a robust operational safety case.
So the U.S. relies more on the hardware certification, DSC, while Canada relies more on the operator's demonstrated operational safety plan, Standard 922.
That's a good way to characterize the difference. Both aim for the same outcome, protecting people on the ground, but they get there via slightly different regulatory philosophies and documentation requirements. #chelsea. The cross-border gold baseline, USA versus Canada.
For companies that work in both countries, this means needing a process that meets both sets of rules. Sort of a gold baseline approach. Let's compare some other key differences, like airspace authorization tech.
Right. We mentioned the U.S. uses LAANC, which relies on the UASFM grid ceilings. Canada uses its own system, the NAV Drone app, which is provided by NAV Canada, their air navigation service provider. It serves the same function, requesting and getting authorization in controlled airspace, but it's tailored to Canada's specific airspace classes and procedures.
Got it. Different app, same purpose. What about something like wildfire restrictions? That seems like a critical safety issue in both countries.
Very critical, and here's a perfect example of where Canada's rules create a stricter default baseline. In the U.S., airspace around a wildfire is typically restricted via a TFR issued by the FAA. You check the TFR list.
Okay, standard procedure. How is Canada different?
Canada has a standing rule baked right into CARS Part 9X. You cannot fly an aircraft manned or unmanned over a forest fire or within 5 nautical miles of its boundary, below 3,000 feet AGL, unless you have specific authorization from the agency managing the fire response.
5 nautical miles. And that applies even if there's no TFR or NOTAM posted.
Exactly. That's the key difference. It's a default standing restriction. If you see smoke that looks like a forest fire, that 5NM 3,000-foot bubble is active by default in Canada.
So for that gold baseline operator working in both countries,
they should treat that Canadian 5NM rule as their automatic minimum standoff distance everywhere. See smoke, assume the 5NM limit applies, then layer on any specific U.S. TFR checks. It's the most conservative, safest approach.
That's a great practical tip. Lastly, remote ID, the digital license plate for drones.
Big difference here currently. In the U.S., remote ID broadcast capability either built-in standard RID or via an add-on module, unless operating in an FRAA is required. Enforcement began March 16, 2024. Your pre-flight must confirm RID compliance and operational status.
And Canada.
As of now, Canada has not mandated remote ID under CARS Part 9. So if you're flying solely in Canada, RID isn't a regulatory requirement yet, though that could certainly change in the future.
Okay, we've laid out the rules, the history, the tech, the scenarios. Now let's get into what really separates the truly elite professional operators from those just meeting the minimums. It's about actively managing risk, right?
It absolutely is. It's about moving from just being compliant to building a proactive, measurable safety system. The best operators don't just meet requirements. They build safety buffers tailored to their specific aircraft, mission, and environment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we're shifting from rules to, well, almost applied science and psychology.
Yeah.
###A. Setting hard numeric tripwires.
Exactly. And a core part of that is using numeric tripwires. These are predefined hard limits written right into your checklist for key variables. They take the subjectivity out of the go-no-go decision.
It becomes math, not just a feeling.
Precisely. It helps counter that external pressure we talked about.
Okay, give us some examples. What's a key numeric tripwire?
Gust spread is a critical one. This isn't just the maximum wind speed. It's the difference between the peak gust speed and the steady wind speed.
Why the spread? Why does that matter more than just the top speed?
Because a large gust spread indicates turbulence, mechanical turbulence often, and erratic air movements. Your drone might handle a steady 20-knot wind fine, but if that 20 knots comes with gusts hitting 35 knots, a 15-knot spread, the air is much more violent. It can easily overwhelm the drone's ability to maintain position or altitude, especially during precise maneuvers or hovering.
So what's a typical tripwire value for gust spread?
It depends a bit on the aircraft's capability, but a common conservative tripwire is to abort or significantly modify the mission if the gust spread approaches or exceeds, say, 10 to 12 knots. You determine your aircraft's comfortable limit in training, and that becomes your hard number.
Okay, gust spread. What's another crucial calculated number?
Return to home, RTH altitude. This is non-negotiable. You never rely on the default RTH altitude setting in your flight control app, ever.
Why not? Isn't it usually set to something reasonable?
Reasonable isn't safe enough. The default doesn't know about the specific trees, buildings, antennas, or terrain at your operating site. RTH altitude must be actively calculated during the site assessment.
And the calculation is?
Find the absolute highest obstacle within your entire planned operating area, scanning widely, not just the immediate launch zone. Take that height AGL and add a safety buffer, usually between 60 and 100 feet. That calculated value is what you manually program into the RTH setting before takeoff.
So if the drone automatically initiates RTH due to lost link or low battery, it climbs high enough to clear everything on its way back.
Correct. Skipping this step is how drones end up hitting treetops or buildings during an emergency RTH.
And we touched on it with night ops, but the fog risk tripwire based on temperature and dew point?
Yes, the TD spread. If the ambient air temperature and the dew point temperature converged within about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, or maybe 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, the air is nearing saturation. Fog formation is highly probable, even if it's clear right now. That narrow spread is your numeric tripwire to modify the planned shorten flights, add observers, or postpone. The physics tells you the risk is too high.
The math makes the decision for you.
And this discipline of using numeric tripwires fits perfectly into a broader risk management framework called bow tie analysis. It's a really powerful visual tool.
Bow tie, like the necktie.
Exactly like the necktie shape. In the center, the knot, you have the top event. This is a critical failure you want to prevent, like a loss of positive flight control or an airspace incursion.
Okay, a bad thing happening.
Right. Then the left side of the bow tie represents everything you do to prevent that top event from happening. These are your threats leading to the event and the preventive barriers you put in place to stop those threats.
So all the pre-flight checks we've discussed, weather, airspace authorization, aircraft inspection, pilot fitness, those are all preventive barriers on the left side.
Precisely. The entire site assessment process builds the left side of the bow tie. Let's take an example.
Okay, let's use airspace incursion as the top event.
Good one. So, a threat could be the complexity of the airspace may be operating right near a Class D airport boundary. A key preventive barrier is performing the Section 107.41 check and obtaining proper authorization via LAANC, making sure your planned flight volume matches the UASFM ceiling for that specific grid.
And you might have multiple barriers.
Yes, layers are good. Another barrier is confirming the drone's GPS lock is strong before takeoff. Then you might have an escalation control, an action that ensures the barrier is working effectively. For the LANC barrier, the escalation control is doing that dual source check against the FAA TFR site and screenshotting the authorization ID. That verifies the barrier is truly in place and functional.
Makes sense. So the left side is prevention. What's the right side of the bow tie?
The right side deals with what happens if the top event occurs despite your preventive barriers. These are your mitigation barriers or recovery measures. Their goal is to reduce the consequences of the failure.
So if you do lose control or stray into unauthorized airspace,
your mitigations kick in. This could be things like immediately switching the controller to a manual or attitude flight mode if possible to regain control, executing that pre-planned, pre-calculated RTH procedure that keeps you below known manned traffic altitudes, having emergency landing zones pre-identified, or for certain high-risk operations like heavy lift near fuel tanks, maybe having a ground crew member ready with a fire extinguisher at the landing zone.
So the bow tie forces you to think through the whole chain. Threat prevention, failure, mitigation, consequence.
Exactly. It maps your entire safety strategy for specific hazard onto one diagram. It helps identify where your defenses are strong and where they might be weak. ###C, safety culture and confidential reporting.
Building and maintaining this kind of rigorous approach, it really requires more than just procedures, doesn't it? It needs a certain safety culture.
Absolutely. A culture where identifying hazards and even reporting mistakes is encouraged, not punished, because that's how systems improve.
And in the U.S. aviation world, there's a key mechanism for that, the NASA ASRS system.
Yes, the Aviation Safety Reporting System, run by NASA. It's a fantastic program, voluntary, confidential, and crucially non-punitive. And importantly for our audience, they started accepting UAS or drone reports back in April 2021.
So drone pilots can confidentially report things like close calls, maybe equipment malfunctions they experienced, confusing airscan instructions, or even honest mistakes they made regarding the rules.
All of the above. The goal is to collect safety data to understand emerging risks and trends across the entire national airspace system.
What's the incentive for a pilot to report their own potential violation? That feels counterintuitive.
The incentive is significant, outlined in FAA Advisory Circular 0006 FTA. If you submit an ASRS report detailing an event, including an unintentional rule violation, within 10 days, NASA forwards the de-identified safety data to the FAA, but the act of filing generally protects the pilot from FAA civil penalties or certificate suspension for that specific incident.
So it provides a measure of protection in exchange for sharing valuable safety information.
Exactly. It prioritizes learning from mistakes over punishment, fostering that critical safety culture. It turns errors into lessons for everyone.
That culture of learning and documentation naturally leads to the idea of the evidence package for each mission. You mentioned auditability earlier.
Yes. Elite operators don't just do the checks, they document the checks rigorously and consistently. Standardization is key.
What should be in that standard evidence package for every single flight?
We recommend a minimum of 5 key items, usually documented with screenshots or save files in a digital job jacket. 1. The airspace authorization confirmation, the LAANC or drone zone approval ID and parameters. 2. The evidence of the dual source TFR and NOTAM check, showing both sources were clear at the time of the flight.
Got it.
3. A formal weather brief, ideally from an official source like the Aviation Weather Center, AWC, not just a consumer phone app, showing you checked winds aloft, TAFs, METARs, the works.
Number 4.
4. The documentation of your obstacle assessment and the calculated RTH altitude for that specific site. Could be a note, a marked up map screenshot, proof you did the calculation.
Finally.
5. Confirmation of remote ID status. Either that the standard RED or module is broadcasting correctly, or a note confirming operation within a designated FRIA.
So those 5 pieces of documented evidence become your proof of due diligence, your audit trail.
Exactly. If the FAA ever questions an operation, or worse, if there's an incident and litigation occurs, that standardized evidence package demonstrates your systematic approach to safety. It converts safety from just a cost center into a tangible demonstration of professionalism and competence that clients value. Hashtag tag DD. Vertical structure inspection detail, the 400-foot rule nuance.
Okay, one last specific scenario that often causes confusion. Inspecting tall structures like cell towers or smokestacks and how that interacts with the 400-foot altitude limit.
Yes, the 400-foot rule and its exception. This definitely trips people up, especially when combined with controlled airspace.
So the basic rule under Part 107 is maximum altitude 400 feet above ground level. Unless
you are flying within a 400-foot lateral radius of a structure, and you don't fly higher than 400 feet above the structure's immediate uppermost limit. This is the so-called 400-foot bubble rule. It's what allows legal inspection of, say, a 600-foot tall wind turbine. You can fly up to 600 feet at the top, plus 400 feet above it, as long as you stay within 400 feet horizontally of it.
Okay, that allows the flight itself. But what happens if that 600-foot tower is sitting inside controlled airspace, maybe Class D, where the Alansue SFM map only shows a ceiling of, say, 200 feet AGL?
Now you have a conflict. The Part 107 rule permits the flight up to the structure's height plus buffer, but the Airspace Authorization System, LAANC, cannot automatically approve flight above that 200-foot grid ceiling.
So the LANC limit still applies, even though the 107 rule gives you permission to fly higher near the structure.
Correct. The automated LANC system is bound by the pre-approved UASFM ceilings for that location. It cannot authorize you to punch through that 200-foot ceiling, regardless of the structure inspection rule.
So how do you legally fly that 600-foot tower inspection in the 200-foot LANC zone?
You have to bypass LANC. This is a classic case requiring an airspace authorization request submitted through Drone Zone.
Because it requires manual review by ATC.
Exactly. You're asking for permission to operate above the established automated ceiling for that controlled airspace. ATC needs to manually review the request, understand you're using the structure exemption, and ensure it doesn't conflict with manned air traffic procedures for that area.
And in that drone zone request, you need to specifically justify why you need to exceed the UASFM limit, citing the structure inspection rule and your planned procedures.
Absolutely. You'll need to provide details on the structure itself, your flight path, staying within the 400-foot lateral bubble, your calculated RTH plan for that higher altitude, probably confirming use of a visual observer, and any other mitigations to assure ATC you can conduct the operation safely above their normal automated altitude limit.
So the rule allows the flight profile, but Drone Zone provides the necessary airspace authorization to exceed the automated limits in controlled airspace. Critical difference.
Very critical for anyone doing serious infrastructure inspection work. #, see your sex, outro.
Wow, okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground here from that B-17 crash in 1935 that gave us the checklist, all the way to navigating LANC grids, remote ID compliance, and the nuances of cross-border ops today.
And we really drilled down into the difference between just following rules and actively managing risk using tools like PAVE, IMSAFE, those crucial numeric tripwires, and the bow tie analysis framework.
I think the core takeaway, the real differentiator for professionals, is making that mental shift. Your pre-flight isn't just a list to tick off. It's a system of calculated, documented, and assured safety barriers.
If you haven't actively calculated your RTH altitude for the site, or checked the gust spread against your preset limit, or done that dual TFR check, then frankly, your pre-flight assessment isn't really complete. You haven't truly started the mission planning.
So for everyone listening, the call to action seems clear. Start implementing these things systematically. Adopt that conservative Canadian wildfire rule as a default. Make dual source airspace checks mandatory. Integrate PVE and IMSAFE into every single pre-flight briefing, even if you're a solo operator.
And start thinking in terms of bow ties. What are the threats for this mission? What are my barriers? How could they fail? And what's my recovery plan? Plan for success, but prepare for failure.
It leads to a final thought, doesn't it? The FAA tells you, check the weather, check airspace, inspect the drone. But it doesn't explicitly tell you if the temp dew point spread is 3 degrees, you must postpone.
Yeah.
It doesn't mandate your specific aircraft's gust spread limit.
Exactly. That's where the remote pilot in command's judgment comes in. The technology, LANC, Road ID, advanced autopilots, it's all incredible. But it doesn't remove responsibility. The true mark of an elite operator is knowing when the data, the conditions, the pressures, when they indicate hitting the no-go button, even if the automated system gives a green light, even if the wind is technically below the drone's max limit.
That willingness to abort, based on your rigorous assessment and those hard tripwires, that remains the ultimate safety barrier, the human factor.
It always comes back to the PIC's judgment and discipline. So
Right.
the question to leave everyone with is, as you plan your next flight, is your go-no-go decision truly based on verifiable math and preset limits? Or is it just based on a feeling or that green light from the app? What stands out to you as the critical check? That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.